Good morning, Garland Nixon here. I guess it's morning here. Maybe it's not morning wherever you are, but Garland Nixon here, and let's talk about the EU. Hello, Garland here. And in light of a number of things that are going on now, I think we need to talk a little bit. We, meaning me, we need to talk a little bit about what's going on in the EU, how um, the Trump election, the demise of the Ukrainian neocon project, and the subsequent deindustrialization of Europe are going to affect um, the EU in the short term and the long term. Let's start here. What kind of things are we seeing? Here's a perfect example. No end to layoffs for German automakers after Audi and Volkswagen and Ford. That's weird the way they do that. Shouldn't they say Audi, Volkswagen, and Ford instead of Audi and Ford, comma, Volkswagen? Who the hell wrote that? What kind of a grammatical, what kind of editor did they have? At any rate, so we see, bottom line, it's really screwed. And if you go down here, Ford Motor Company plans to cut 4,000 jobs across Europe and the UK by the end of 2027. They go on after weaker than expected EV sales. So they go on and all. They're all, let's go to another one. And this is something that has to be taken into account along with the auto industry, right? German auto supplier Bosch to cut 5,500 jobs in further sign of car makers' woes, right? There's good old Bosch. Frankfurt, their technology and services company, Bosch, says Friday is planned to reduce its automotive division workforce by as many as 5,500 jobs in the next several years, citing stagnating global auto sales, too much factory capacity in the auto industry. Think about what they're saying. Too much factory capacity in the auto industry compared with sales. That's the same thing as saying stagnating sales. Gee, we can make 10 cars, but we can only sell one. That means we've got too much factory capacity. Well, you didn't have too much factory capacity before, but now you do. And a slower than expected transition to electric powered software controlled cars. Let's see, you're selling cars for 50, 80, $100,000 and people can't even afford to heat their homes. I can't understand why that's not working. Oh, might I add that people have found out in the United States that you buy an electric car and they tell you that it can go 287 miles between charges, and then the temperature drops down to 0 degrees centigrade, and now it can go 4 miles. It won't start. You got to get it towed. And what's worse than that is you go to the charging station and that doesn't work because it's too cold. So needless to say, as for right now, this green powered, electric powered vehicle dream that they had has been exposed as bullcrap, right? The news comes after Ford says they're going to do 4,000. Stellantis, created through the 2021 merger of PSA, Peugeot, and Fiat, and Chrysler tumbled 27%. Let me tell you something. Stellantis is going to tumble a lot more than that. Stellantis is going to go out of business anytime you go look for a Jeep, and it's 60, 70, and $80,000 for a friggin' Jeep. I'm sorry. If I can buy a brand new Lexus, a luxury, ultra luxury edition vehicle for the same price that I can buy a friggin' Jeep, the Jeep ain't happening. The kind of people that buy Jeeps can't afford them anymore. The kind of people that buy pickup trucks can't afford them anymore. It's interesting to see the ending the fallout, shall we say, of neoliberalism, right? That is We're going to find ways to make things more expensive and more luxurious, to make them cheaper. You continue to make things more and more expensive. As neoliberalism hollows out the working class. So now, and they can't see that, they couldn't see this coming. A pickup truck costs more, but the people who buy pickup trucks have less. And you couldn't see that an $80,000 pickup truck was going to end up sitting on the lot. Right now, the um, major all of the car companies in the West are heading towards disaster, or heading towards going out of business, simply because neoliberalism. It's, we're going to make things a certain way. We're going to decide that we need culturally to move towards a green economy, which means electric vehicles, which means that we got to make electric vehicles, which is going to cost a fortune, but people ain't going to be able to buy them. But somehow it'll all work out. Then we're going to make these trucks that are unbelievably beautiful. They're incredible trucks, and they're extremely expensive, and people are going to buy them at a time when that doesn't match the economic woes of the working class. Interesting. And they couldn't see this coming. If you look at what's going on militarily, politically, and diplomatically around the world, doesn't it kind of match the auto industry, right? Blind people that can't see, the people in Africa and Latin America, they've had it with these neoliberal, neoconservative monsters coming to their property, coming to their countries, stealing all their stuff. The working class in Europe and the US have had it up to here with the Bidens and the Macrons and the Trudeaus and the Obamas. They've had it up to here with them because it's not working for them. It's not that they like or don't like the people. It's an outcome that doesn't work for the working class. And in the same way that these lunatics and idiots can't see that their military misadventures and their political misadventures aren't going to work, they can't see internally that their economic plans are have some very significant holes in them. Come on, I don't have a background in projecting sales for major companies, but I could, if they'd have said, "Hey, Garland, we got a plan," and I said, "What?" "Okay, all right. We're going to make all new pickup trucks, and they're going to be incredible." And I'd be like, "Great." And they're going to be like 70, 80,000. And guess what else? What? There'll be 6-cylinder pickup trucks. We're going to try to sell them in the United States. And well, there'll be some electric ones too. And those are going to be 110,000. What do you think, Garland? I'd say it'll never work. And if they said why, I'd say because people don't have the money to buy them. And they'd go, "Oh, I never thought about that. We're making products that people can't afford." For some reason, that doesn't dawn on them, and that's where we are. So you have a cacophony. That's a good word, cacophony, right? A bunch of like a band where all of the think of a band where all of the instruments are out of tune, and you hear all of these noises and all different directions that just sound like hell. A cacophony of circumstances coming together to wipe out the European and ultimately the American economy. The blindness and stupidity of the ruling elite. Dare I need to go to Hollywood? Dare I need to go to Hollywood? Every time, like, I go on YouTube and I look for these things that say the best horror movies, trailers for the best horror movies coming out in 2024, trailers for the best scientific sci-fi movies coming out in 2024, right? And I'm like, all right, let's see the first one. And they're like, okay, a strong and powerful woman lands on a planet. Okay, well, let me see what's the next horror. Let's see what. Hey, here's a horror movie. Let's check out this. All right, a diverse group of women, and I'm like, why does every single movie, whether it's horror or whatever the case may be, start with a diverse group of women, a strong, diverse group of women? I watched this one and I forgot the name of this thing. I'm watching this trailer for this movie, right? And I see some person who really had no shape at all in a tight, and so they had him in this skin tight outfit, which basically showed that the person had no shape whatsoever, right? And I'm watching this thing. I'm like, is it a man? Is it a woman? One thing for sure, they're a shapeless person, right? And the person comes up and they're climbing up the side of this cliff. And finally they climb up the cliff and they stand there. And this shapeless person, it seems to be genderless too, because in looking at the face, I can tell by the features that it's a woman, but that's the only thing that shows it's a woman. I'm like, there's no shape here. There's no female shape. There's no real male shape. And the haircut is that of a man, but it's clearly a woman. And I'm like, oh, that's right. This movie is going to be starring one of these gender neutral people, right? And I'm thinking, nobody's going to go watch that movie. So, in the same way, think about this. In the same way, we look at Hollywood, right? And they make these movies of gender neutral people or all a group of strong, um, diverse women beating the hell out of guys. And they tell us, yes, the movie was written, directed, and produced by an all women writers and producers and directors. And we're like, I don't care about that. I just want to see if the movie's good. You watch the movie and it sucks. And then you go to, okay, well, that doesn't work. Hey, I'll go to the dealer. I need a new pickup. Hey, that's a great pickup. Tell me about it. Well, it's a great pickup. It has everything on it for a meager $89,000. Oh, okay, well, that don't work. And you start realizing it's all the same thing. Well, let's see. I guess it's time to vote. Let's see what we got in politics. Who are the Democrats running? They've got a strong, diverse woman. I'm starting to see a pattern here. Are there any men anymore? Are there men maybe in a movie? They're running for office, something like that. Maybe, perhaps we could have something. And they're like, this is kind of surprising, but none of the men voted for us. Let's see if we can talk about it. And I'm thinking, yeah, let's see if, boy, this is going to be a tough one to figure out, right? It's not about men or women. It's about just put forward somebody that seems like they can do the job. And maybe the movie's good, maybe it's not. And then they get pissed when people say, well, I'm upset with the DEI hires. Well, you racist, scumbag, white supremacist. How dare you be against that? And you're like, perhaps you don't understand what people are saying. They're not saying they're against women or men or BIPOCs. That's the one. You're a BIPOC. What the hell's a BIPOC? A black or indigenous person of color. Perhaps you could stop talking about that while you're committing genocide and supporting Nazis. Okay, so perhaps all this morals, upstanding way of seeing the world you have has a few holes in it when you're friggin' committing genocide and hugging Nazis. But at any rate, so my point is this: yes, we can argue that all of that is to get back to this. We can argue that the Ukraine conflict is destroying the EU and the Western economy. But it ain't the only thing. Even if they didn't have the Ukraine conflict, it would just more slowly, because there is this moral posturing going on. And so what the ruling elite do, they come up with a set of morals that seem to be different than the ones that the people traditionally held. Not saying tradition is all good. Tradition, there are bad traditions. I think you got to weed them out. For instance, at one time, the tradition was slavery. So you could have possibly said, well, that ain't a great tradition. Hey, there are traditions that we see that sometimes need to be, shall we say, adjusted or thrown out. But there are other traditions that are part of human history, shall we say, that have caused humans to be able to do things like procreate and have kids. Maybe we'll get rid of all of those, right? But my point being, the decay of Western industrialization. I'm not going to use the word civilization because there is a difference. In the West, we have mistaken industrialization for civilization. Because you have industries, because you have an iPhone, does not mean that you're civilized. Your civilization is based on the way, to me, you act towards others. Do you act in a civil manner? Do you act civilly towards others? Do you act right? Not do you. What is a civilization? Well, if we can produce certain things, if we have the most lethal weapons, remember this, we're going to have the most lethal weapons in the world. That ain't civilization. It is industrialization. In fact, it's the opposite of civilization. It's industrial brutalization and the ability to basically, think about this. When Kamala Harris said, we're going to have the most lethal military in the world, what was she really saying? She was saying, as we have done in the past with colonialism. We would go to a country, we had superior weapons, we'd kill lots of their people, and we'd take their stuff. And that's what we were able to do. And then people were saying, well, that's changing because other countries have hypersonic missiles and Oreshnik or whatever the hell it is, kind of missiles and all kinds of things that they have that we don't have. So we can't do it anymore. And Kamala Harris was saying, okay, we're going to get back to the point where we can militarily dominate the world and force everyone through kinetic warfare to do what we want, or we'll kill them, right? And number one, it ain't working and it can't work. But number two, I think most people in the West saw the flaws in that, because in order to do that, we now got to send all of our young men and women over to these various countries to die for corporate domination of the world, right? We're going to make the world safe for corporate oligarchy, and people didn't want that. Okay, so all this is going to go all this getting back to the ruling elite and their panic. So all of these things are coming together at the same time, and I think you can't separate them. I think you can't separate the industrial and cultural errors of the ruling elite, Hollywood making movies where there's just one sucky, stinky, horrible movie after the other, and every one of them has a group of what do you call it? Strong women dominating this or that, a diverse group of women, right? Every one of them. It's the same one. It's the same movie over and over, over and over and over. A diverse group of women or diverse group of fill in the blank. Let's turn on a advertisement. You got one black person, one Muslim guy, one Asian woman, one gay person, one this, one that, right? And I look at some of these advertisements, and it's like unbelievable. This recent advertisement, who was it? Jaguar, that people are talking about, right? And what they did was, these are all like gender nondescript or gay people in their various colors, and they got various colors on, and they're all doing much of nothing. They're just being there. And we're supposed to look at that and say, hey, look, there's like a dozen people together, and some of the men have on dresses and their hair done up like women, and I can't tell what half the people are, and I guess I'll buy a Jaguar. What the hell, right? That ain't happening. They didn't do that for that to happen. That's not a Jaguar advertisement. That is a look at me. I go along with the way things with the ruling elite. Now, the ruling elite have decided that we're supposed to act and think like that. Look at me. I act and think like that. They're just virtue signaling, but only amongst themselves. So that's it. That Jaguar advertisement was perfect. Virtue signaling amongst themselves. And everybody is, look, will there be some people that look at that and say, oh, that pisses me off, I'm not buying a Jaguar? Absolutely. Will there be people that looks at that and say, that's a stupid advertisement, what the hell? Fair enough. But this is a corporation spending money. And if Garland Nixon is in charge of the corporation, and the people come up with that ad and say, hey, CEO Nixon, we got a great ad, I'm going to go like, great. And before we start, what is the plan here? What is the outcome we're looking for? To sell more Jaguars. Okay, I'm going to watch this ad. And when this ad is over, the only thing I want you to do is tell me how this convinces people to buy more Jaguars. Let's go. I'd watch the ad and I'd say, well, interesting ad, lots of bright colors, various and sundry people, lots of guys dressed like women and women dressed like guys, and all that stuff that you have there. And I'm sure the London ruling elite and the people in Hollywood and New York will be jumping up, clapping, saying that was a beautiful thing. I love the bright colors, and there's lots of gay people, so they're going to be happy. But I got nothing against gay people. However, there is one minor flaw I think we need to address in that advertisement. What is that? There's nothing really there that's going to motivate people to buy Jaguars. And the last I checked, we sell Jaguars. And we're paying money for an advertisement. And if you can't show me in the next 5 minutes how that's going to sell us Jaguars, I'm going to fire everybody in the damn room and replace you with someone who has brains enough to figure out how to sell Jaguar. See, that's why I ain't running Jaguar. Because if I'm running Jaguar, I mean, nothing personal. Hey, great, those are models and people and all the neoliberal bullshit. Yeah, we're trying to sell Jaguars, dude. And if you can't tell me how that sells Jaguars, you are fired because I don't see it, right? Okay, so you have a group of elite, ruling elite, who have lost touch with even the mission of their particular job, of their industry. Rather than try to sell Jaguars, Jaguars are going to virtue signal to the ruling elite because they're members of the ruling elite, which means, here's one thought, they ain't selling Jaguars. That means the working class who build Jaguars, the people at Bosch who build parts for Jaguars, they're going to lose their jobs. And if it wasn't bad enough that they're screwing up their industries by building things that people can't afford, by advertising things that by doing advertisements that don't advertise a damn thing, all of that they're doing to totally botch up their economies. And might I add, finding AI and all kinds of other computerized and with mechanical ways to lay off everybody in the factory, and never realizing that the people in the factory are the ones who buy the stuff that you make. And if you put all the people in the factory out of business, and that's your customer base, and you lay them off and leave them sleeping on a park bench, when you open your showroom and say, hey, everybody, come one and come all and buy my product, the people that would be buying your product are now sleeping on a park bench or in their cars. They never figured this out. So before we even get to Ukraine, the cultural, what's the word I'm looking for? Expression of the ruling elite has dominated the economic decisions of the ruling elite's corporations and has destroyed any possibility that they now are viable businesses. Not before we even get to Ukraine. I'm not going to a movie just because you've got a group of diverse, strong females. In fact, I'm not opposed to that. I could go watch a movie with a strong group of diverse females. If it's a good movie, the movies ain't even good. And I need some options. I need a movie. When there was plenty of movies with strong, diverse females over the course of, there was Wonder Woman, there was the various and sundry, what was it? The Terminator, Sarah Connor, she got to be pretty tough, beating the hell out of people and stuff. Great, wonderful. Fantastic. How about Alien? One of my favorite. Aliens, the second one was one of my favorite movies of all time. Fantastic. Great. Love it. Right. Sigourney Weaver, tough, broad, right? She was good old-fashioned toughness, right? Loved it, right? Guys loved Alien. It was a guy movie. Women didn't like it so much. So don't tell me guys, oh, we don't like a strong woman. We like a good friggin' movie. But while there were aliens, there were other movies with guys. How about Blade, a black dude? One of my favorite. Oh my God, does it get any better than Blade? Love that. You got vampires, you got karate, you got swords, you got sci-fi. Come on. But when every single movie is the same movie, people are going to stop going because they feel like they're being manipulated culturally. I don't have to. I just want a good movie, and now the movies are bad. So neoliberalism has hollowed out the traditional money-making industries in the West. Traditional money, done. Now we get to Ukraine. Well. If they hadn't done enough, they then, and here's where they really screwed. They started the Ukraine project, and they based it all on lies. Bit by bit, because of foreign policy, because of foreign policy, my bad, because of alternative media, people are always going to find out the truth. See, there are those of us who are, there are those of us out there who are, we research, we figure things out, and we run our mouth about it. People like me, maybe Alexander Mercouris, and lots of people. I could go on and on and on. You know who they are, who I'm not comparing myself to Alexander Mercouris. He's a brilliant guy, and what he does is really something extraordinary. What they do over at the Duran, him and Al, is extraordinary. I love their work, right? People complain about this or that. I don't care what you complain about. If you don't like Alexander Mercouris' work, don't watch it. But it's extraordinary work. in my opinion. Dialogue Works is great. What's the other one? Neutrality Studies, right? There's all of these people out here doing fantastic work. My buddy, who I was on the show the other day, you can go over to Rumble and Rockfin, AM Wake Up, and those guys, Steve Poikonen. There's so many people doing good work out here, right? Black Agenda Report, I know those people in the Black Alliance for Peace. I could go on and on. There's a lot of people that are doing different things. They're working on Haiti. They're working on South America and Venezuela and Cuba. They're working on Africa, you name it. So there are lots of people out here who are finding the truth, and a lot of them, like me, are not I'm a professional journalist now, but that wasn't my my bailiwick, shall we say. So bit by bit, when they came out with nothing but lies, that to move forward with the Ukraine project, the neocon project, which involved Ukraine, they were always doomed to fail because there's an alternative media out here and there was no way. And here's the problem they had. That alternative media was built by them. They built it during COVID. The ruling elite built the alternative media, and that's an easy one. And I think everybody listening knows how, right? The COVID thingy changed the lives of people, angered a lot of people. People felt as though they didn't have a voice in their government. The government might say you're locked down. The government might say you got to do this, you got to do that, various things and sundry things. This was public policy. And what people saw was this. If this is in fact a democracy, whatever country it was, and I see public policy, I should have a say in it. And I've got some questions about public policy. And what we really started seeing, my main man, who a very good friend of mine, Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, who I had on yesterday, talks about this. What really pissed people off during COVID, that got us this alternative media, that got us here today, was the concept that you're not allowed to question the ruling elite. You're not allowed to question public policy. Once they said do this, and you said, well, okay, well, time out. You're asking me to do something that I got real problems with. This is going to hurt our economy. This is going to hurt this and that, on and on. I got questions for it. Let's get some questions for the ruling elite. And they discounted that. You have no right to question. Come on. You're not a doctor. You're not a scientist. And it was the doctors and scientists and the government have come to a consensus. And you, sir, your place is to shut up and follow the consensus. And people's position was, but it doesn't seem like that's in my best interest. It doesn't seem like it's going to better my life. There are factors here that need to be taken into consideration. And if this is a democracy, as you tell me, we have a right to question public policy. That's built in democracy. And so what we got was the ruling elite really came together on that one, and they really made their positions clear, right? It went from we're the ruling elite and this is a democracy to, and you really should watch, if you haven't, you really should watch. That was a great discussion with Dr. Jim Kavanaugh that I had yesterday. You really should watch that one. He's a brilliant guy, and I love the way he puts things in. He's a real everyday man, everyday kind of guy, but he's really a brilliant intellectual. But at any rate, so during COVID, they said, now, well, you'll be thrown off of social media. We'll shut you down, right? They got real heavy-handed from the velvet glove to the iron fist, and then other platforms started to arise. Rockfin arose, and these other platforms started to arise so that people could question them, or First Amendment freedom, things of that nature. And that question started to arise, and the alternative media, the term alternative media was given birth to. The term started coming up, alternative media. And all that meant was people who weren't trained by the traditional journalistic entities, colleges, you name it, or people who didn't come from groups that are blessed and sanctified by the ruling elite, people like me, retired law enforcement, people who were former military. Alexander McCorris, well, he was a lawyer, but he comes from a family of, a very significant family in powerful family in Greece. People who are regular old guys who ask questions. We have people like Glenn Deason. We have brilliant um, intellectuals. We have people like the people over at Black Agenda Report who are like kind of traditional black radical, I guess is the word, who never trusted the system. I could go on, but it all comes down to this. You could go to all these different alternative media outlets. It all comes down to this: people who historically never trusted the system. Okay, so they build this momentum of alternative media starts growing, and it's rolling like an avalanche. And then they launch the Ukraine conflict, which they really needed to maintain and control the story, control the narrative. And what terrible timing for them, because they created this alternative media inadvertently, this alternative media sphere. And after creating this sphere, they started something that would require them to closely control the narrative. And might I add, something else happened because of the things that happened in COVID, and so many people were unhappy, with the policies, but even more unhappy with the fact that they were beaten and chastised and outlawed if they attempted to even question the policies or go on social media or on any platform and discuss their disdain for the government policies. Because of that, an appetite for alternative media was growing. So they created an alternative media. They created a thirst and a hunger and an appetite for what alternative media was putting out. And they created a tremendous group of people, a huge group of their citizens who lost all trust for the government and had anger for the government and angst and anxiety about what the government was going to do next. So then they're like, all right, now it's time to launch the Ukraine conflict. Yeah, that was bad timing. But they did get some schmucks and schlamazels for a while who was flying blue and yellow flags. However, this was just another one of their ludicrous, preposterous, and absurd ventures that could never have worked, and that everyday people like us could have looked at it and said, let's see, what's the evaluation? What are you trying to do? Okay, so your plan is, number one, you got to lie to the people in your respective countries so they don't know what you're doing, and you have to oppress those who stick their hands up and say, hey, we're being had. So that's what you got to do. You got to lie to the people, and you must suppress anyone that says, hey, we're being lied to. Right after COVID, right after more and more people don't trust you, and more people are out there trying to do alternative media. So you got to lie to the people and suppress alternative media at a time when you really need to control the narrative. Bad timing, guys. So this starts. Well, you get some schlamazels that believe, I think the same people who were getting their fifth booster, a lot of them are the same ones who, had a blue and yellow flag, right? There were people who went along with the program, but there was a lot who didn't. And as time went on, we would have looked at it and told them this ain't going to work because is it really Russia you're choosing? Let's see what the history is. Oh, yeah, everybody who attacks Russia gets their ass kicked. Probably not a good idea to attack Russia. This ain't going to work, right? At a time when your economy is hollowing out, you're up to your ears in debt, your military is hollowing out, and you're going to attack Russia, probably not a good idea. Probably about as good idea as putting out a Jaguar advertisement that has nothing to do with cars. Probably just about as brilliant as that. Okay. So they moved forward at that. Who couldn't have seen that this was going to go down the toilet? Well, for starters, in John Bolton's book, I think it was called The Something Man in the Room or something, whatever the hell it was. Who cares? It was John Bolton. He's a fascist. He mentioned that basically, I'm paraphrasing, but the neocons saw Europe as the second big threat economically after China. So they figured we'll kill two birds with one stone. We'll neutralize militarily Russia. We will also neutralize, militarily and economically neutralize Russia, and we will militarily and economically neutralize Europe. Now, I think the other thing is they felt that we can use Europe as patsies. We can use all of their arms, take all of their money. So we take Europe. We use all of their arms, all of their money. We take everything they got. We throw that into Ukraine. So Ukraine defeats or at least depletes Russia and makes it weaker. At the same time, that weakens Europe. At the same time, we're looking good because they're both weak. And we now have a compliant government in Russia, and we can say to the countries in the Middle East, guess what? We control the price of oil, so you better do what we say. We can then also say to China, guess what? We control the oil, which you need, and we control a lot of the natural resources that Russia has, which you need. And guess what? Now we are the dominant force in the world once again, and it's easy. So it's not that we have to take out Russia to take out China, but if we take out Russia, it's over for China and Europe and everybody. If we get Russia, the natural resources that we have will allow us to control the market on so many things that it's all downhill from there. But that taking out Russia part's been pretty tough over the centuries. You know, you can ask, bring up the ghost of Hitler and Napoleon and what's that guy, Charles the 12th or whatever from Sweden. Ask them how that taking out Russia part works. Generally doesn't. They generally end up in your capital. You know, ask Berlin, they ended up in the capital. Ask Paris after they, when Napoleon attacked them, who was the guy like riding a horse leading the so-called allies, whatever you want to call them, into Paris. It was a Russian guy, right? Hey, you attack Russia, you usually end up hanging out in your capital at some point, right? Not a good idea, but the neocons didn't get it. So, long and short of it is, off they go with their plan. And if you think about it from the perspective of Europe, it really worked pretty well because Europe's being deindustrialized, right? So they kind of got what they want, impoverished Europe. Europe's got to buy gas from the America. Oh, by the way, Europe, something you might want to think about. And this is going to be real ugly for Europe, real ugly. So Donald Trump and his so-called America First stuff, one of the things that Donald Trump wants is low gas and low oil prices. He believes that that'll help our economy. It will, but here's the thing about it. At what cost to Europe? I will damn guarantee you this, that shortly after coming in to office, that Trump is going to do something, it's something down the line of, why are we selling all of this oil and stuff to Europe while the prices for us are higher? Why don't we cut down on some of these things that we're selling to Europe and use it here and sell it here and keep the prices down at home? I mean, think about it. Russia has a lot of gas and fuel. You go to Russia, it's pretty, comparatively, it's cheap. Why? Because they can sell it to their own people cheap. There are a lot of countries right now that you go to that produce particular things. And the government says, let's say they produce corn. The government says, overseas, we're selling corn at the market price. At home, we eat a lot of corn and we can do it cheap. We're going to sell it to our people at cost, at cheaper prices, at whatever, and keep the price down for our people. I think Trump's going to do something like that. I think that's almost a definite in my opinion. And at a time when the Europeans have pissed the Russians off, the Russians have gas contracts, I think, that end in 2026, their gas contracts with Europe. And my understanding is they've already sent written notifications to Europe saying, guys, we're not renewing those gas contracts and blah, blah, blah. We're selling them elsewhere, India, wherever, Pakistan, China, you name it. Have a nice life. See you later. And of course, what the Europeans have been trying to do is buy the liquefied natural gas. And if you don't know about liquefied natural gas, it's very, very expensive to produce. You got to have these big factories, right? Then when you bring it in, you got to have special ships to move it. You have to have special ports to deal with it. And then you have to have a piping network, and you put it in a network and you mix it with 13% oxygen and all this stuff. I know a lot about it because in the Chesapeake Bay, we have a big facility at Cove Point. And for those who don't know my background, I had a background at the time when I worked for the governor's office. I started, in law enforcement. I became a law enforcement official, and then I was kind of semi-assigned to the governor's office to do work on terrorism and all that kind of stuff, and got a lot of training and all that stuff. That's when I worked with the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force and DTRA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, which is under the Joint Chiefs of Staff. All that stuff I worked with in law enforcement, right? I was in administrative fields. And one of the things that I did was I helped to design the security plan. Helped to work on, I didn't design it per se, but I helped to work on the security plan for the Cove Point um, LNG facility and for the Calvert Cliffs nuclear power station. So I learned a lot about nuclear power stations. I learned a lot about LNG there when I was working on the security um, plans for those. So that's how I know a bit about these things. And so a lot of people think the ship, well, if a ship is punctured with one of these things, it would blow up. No, actually, it would, if it burned, it would burn more like a torch. Really, if one of these LNG ships punctured and burned, it would burn like a torch. In order to explode, it has to be mixed with 13% oxygen, and then it becomes, more explosive, right? But they do that after it's unloaded, and then it's mixed, and then it goes off into the pipelines, right? So it's not as dangerous as people think it is. People think, oh my gosh, it could blow us all to smithereens. That's not necessarily the case. And if it escaped, it would kind of sit and rise and dissipate, and it's not as dangerous as you would think. But to tell you what it is, it's expensive as hell. It's a lot cheaper to just send the gas through the pipeline to Germany and they burn it than it is to send it into a facility where it's frozen with liquid nitrogen and it's put liquefied and it's put on a ship and it's taken across of extremely expensive ship, and then it's taken across the sea to Europe, and then it's taken out, and then it's treated. That's a lot more expensive than a pipeline. So while Europe, they always talk about Europe's access to gas, the issue is not the access to energy. The issue is the price of the energy that you have access to. It's just like the pickup trucks, right? I have access to a new Ford pickup truck, but that Ford pickup truck is $90,000. So I got access to it, but I can't afford it. So you've got access to energy to heat your house in Berlin. Hooray! How much is it? Well, it's going to cost you $5,000 a month in order to do it. Well, but it costs more to heat my house than it does to pay for the house. But you've got access to it, right? So bottom line is this: the energy crisis only compounded the other stuff, right? I remember reading something a few years ago that Volkswagen planned on changing all of their plants within the next 10 years to EV. The thought amongst the ruling elite was everything's going EV, right? Because they all convinced themselves of that. EV, what do you think? EV, everybody, we're all going EV, right? So they all started planning, talk about the perfect storm. They all start planning to go to electric vehicles when people don't want them and can't afford them. And they don't serve the purposes that people need as they currently are configured, right? If in fact you had electric vehicles that had 500 miles, now we're talking, now I buy an electric vehicle. If I count 500, 800 kilometers or what have you, yeah, we're talking. I'd be ready to buy an electric vehicle, except this: I don't need a new vehicle right now. And if I go there and like, oh man, they got one to do 700 kilometers. Now we're talking, how much is that? $66,000. See you later. I'm going to go back and drive my whatever it is you're driving. I'm going to drive my old beat up Peugeot from that I bought in 1976. I'll keep driving that. I can't afford $66,000 for this vehicle. Right. So there was just so many holes in the ruling elite's plan to go to electric vehicles. I have read somewhere that if I think 20% of Americans switch to electric vehicles, that it would crash our electric grid. That the bottom line is this: our electric grid, even for all of their plans to go to EVs, if they got what they wanted, that it would crash the electric grid. Can you imagine that? I mean, right now, on a hot day in the summer, when too many people have their air conditioners on, we have brownouts. Oh boy, this old, when was this, what do you call it? Electrical infrastructure built 1957. Oh, really? Yeah. And what happens if we turn on our air conditioners at the same time, we get brownouts? Oh, that ain't good. Well, what happens if we all charge our electric vehicles at the same time? You'll have blackouts. They won't be brownouts. You'll run out. So their plan is to put everybody on an electrical vehicle, and if they get what they want, it will shut down our electrical grid because our grid can't handle that. And probably there's a lot of the same in Europe. Again, even if they win, they lose. Their plans would never have worked, but they didn't stop to take into account that when it gets cold, which it gets cold in a lot of places in Europe and here, the distance that a electrical vehicle can go dramatically decreases. And not only that, I know a guy who had to drive somewhere that was like 17 hours. And I mean, like 9 hours, and it took him 17 in his Tesla because he could drive 2 hours, charge for 40 minutes, drive 2 hours, charge for 50 minutes, right? And he's like, I'm gonna get rid of this damn thing. This is ridiculous. So people don't have the time. Nothing worked out. They didn't think anything through. So what do we have as a perfect storm? We have companies who are not advertising their product. They're doing um, non-gender, various gender, multicolor, diverse advertisements that are nothing but virtue signaling to other members of the ruling elite that ain't going to sell them no Jaguars. And even if they did Jaguar advertisements, most people couldn't afford the Jaguars anymore. And that if the people could afford the Jaguars, they don't want the electric ones, and you can't afford to make them because the fuel, the energy is too expensive to run the Jaguar company. You see what I'm saying? Everything is going bad. So what do we have now? We have economies crashing. And while people say it's because they lost energy, cheap energy from Russia, from one perspective, you can say that's true. But from another perspective, if we say the people made a series of bad decisions, any one of those decisions would have been extremely problematic. Collectively, in the aggregate, those decisions put together are cataclysmic, right? We can divide. Well, first they did this, then they did this, then they did that, then they did this, then they did that. All these decisions together have destroyed the economies. But what if we change them into one, the decision of neoliberalism, which included all of them? Neoliberalism, includes foreign policy, which we call neoconservatism. It includes economic policy, which we call neoliberalism. It includes cultural policy, which we call wokeism. All these isms, all of these things we separate using words, but it's all one damn thing. Look, a big part of the wokeism is this, I believe. It's the neoconservatives. Why is it? Well, if you're going to go around overthrowing countries, right, bombing and stealing all of their stuff, you can't just say to your population, hey guys, we're evil. And your population will say, great, love being evil. You have to convince your population that you're doing good things. So you say to your population, hey, population, we've got to go and we've got to go into that country. Why? We've got to bring them democracy. Well, that's a good thing. We've got to look out for the women. Look at this. They don't take care of the women there. And particularly of color, whatever that means. Okay. And the LGBTQ. Well, these countries, they don't look out for the LGBTQ community. And they're, God forbid, you don't even start me on the trans community, right? So what you got is you have one suite, I like that word, a suite of policies that we can call neoliberalism. And the kind of tag into that was the pure, unadulterated, brute strength against other countries. And that was what you were going to do against Russia. Now, here's a fatal flaw there. If you listen to what they said about Ukraine, the Ukraine project, right? The neocon world domination project, and the portion of that project that was Ukraine, which also, might I add, it wasn't just the portion, it was the hub, it was the linchpin, right? It was the leading edge of that was Ukraine. Ukraine needed to happen, right? And if you look at that, what did they constantly say? There was a neoliberal conversation about it that went like this. We're going to send more money. Think about that. The Russians were like, well, we need to mobilize some more troops. Why? Troops are physical things. What do we need? We need guns. We need ammo. We need troop carriers. We need missiles and bullets. They were in the realm of reality. They were in the realm of kineticism, right? We need things. If I'm going to fight you, some guy comes and says, I'm going to come back tomorrow. It's like this. The old Star Trek, right? They dropped Captain Kirk on a planet, and there was the captain of another ship on the planet, and they said, you guys got to fight. And what did Captain Kirk first start doing? Looking around for a weapon. I got to have a weapon. I got to find something to defend myself with or to fight this guy with, right? Look around for a weapon. He didn't look around for money. He didn't look around the planet and say, gold and diamonds. He actually found diamonds and he used those as projectiles. He like had sulfur and other things. And so he had all the ingredients for gunpowder. So he created gunpowder. He found this round tube and he found a bunch of diamonds. Did he say, I'm rich? No, he shoved the diamonds in the tube. He fired them out. They made the gunpowder up. And then he also had like a flint and some metal and he made a spark and he fired the thing at the enemy, right? Okay. But he didn't look at those diamonds and say, oh, we've got diamonds and gold and oh my God, I'm rich. No, practically speaking, I ain't rich. I'm trying to stay alive and I got to fight this enemy. So while we looked around for the diamonds, hey, we're fighting the Russians. What do we need? Diamonds and gold. We're rich. Let's send money to Ukraine. And the Russians said, let's send weapons to Ukraine. We need to build more weapons. We need more industrial capacity. And what did we hear over here? We heard from the Russians, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to increase our industrial capacity. We've got a bunch of factories left over from the Soviet Union. I know, we'll put people in them and build stuff for the war. Great idea, right? They had leftover industrial capacity. And might I add, if you look into it, what the Russians did when the Soviet Union closed down, did they knock those factories down, destroy them? No, they kind of put them in mothballs. They set them aside in case they'd be needed later. And when they were needed later, they had the reserve industrial capacity. And they understood that war is based on industrial capacity. Boom, they start increasing their industrial capacity. Here, what do we say? Hey, a lot of money to be made. Lockheed Martin, let's get to making it. And Lockheed Martin's like, oh my God, these missiles are $2 million each. We'll make a fortune. While Russia said, how can we make more missiles for less money? How can we substitute missiles with drones, substitute planes with drones? How can we save money? How can we make more product for less and win the war? And over here, you had a bunch of ruling elites saying, how can we get rich? And of course, in Ukraine, you had a bunch of crooks saying, hey, how can we peel this loot off? Hey, we're fitting to get paid, bro. We are fixing to get paid. So you had Ukrainian crooks, they're about to get paid. You got the oligarchs here and in Europe figuring out how they can make buku money. And you got the Russians saying, yeah, we better build more clubs so we can hit somebody over the head with them and win the war. Which, might I add, when you open those factories up and put people in them and those people start working hard and making money, guess what happens? Your economy gets stronger. And the people there say, we're supporting our government is delivering. So you had the Russians who understood the importance of the kinetic aspect of war, the industrial capacity, that the necessities of high industrial capacity, addressing that. And over here, you had a bunch of schmozzles saying, how can we get rich? How can we make less? See, we want to build less missiles and make more money. And the Russian says, we want to build more missiles and we don't care about the money. And we want to build better missiles. So we kept saying, we're sending more money, another 80 billion, another 20 billion. And the Russians are like, we're sending another 80 tanks, another 20 tanks. Oh, yeah, we'll send 40 billion. We'll send another 40 tanks. Which is going to win? Who's going to win? Hey, Garland, you got to go up against that T-90. Great. What do I have? Here's a satchel of money. Whoa, a satchel of money. Well, it's $50 million. Okay, but that guy's got a tank. All right, tell you what, we'll give you 100 million. It's still a tank. But fair enough. Okay, you got it. Here's $200 million. No, I'm going to be dead because that's a tank. The Russians understood that. Neoliberalism works off of high profits. The good news is some people made a lot of money off the war. The bad news is at some point you can only send money to Ukraine. So now they're like, all right, let's send more stuff to Ukraine. What do we have? Well, another 80 billion. Okay, we're going to use that to buy stuff. Well, we're going to put it down on the stuff, but it can't be built. For how long? It's going to take 5 years before they can get more stuff out. We don't have the industrial capacity. This war was lost on a number of things, not the least of which being industrial capacity. And again, what is that? That's neoliberalism. So let me show you something here. We need to look at this. And this is what the ruling elite are thinking. And hope I can get to make this happen. Looky here, looky here. Borrell, EU's future depends on the outcome of Russia's war on Ukraine. Bad news, EU. If that's what your future depends on, oh, you got problems. Okay, and I think that's just scare tactics, but let's continue. So Borrell told journalists in Brussels following a meeting, journalists, and there ain't no journalists. Here's journalists on YouTube and Rockfin and Rumble and stuff like that. The ministers had overwhelmingly agreed that Ukraine's fate will determine the fate of the European Union. They should have thought of that before they picked a fight with Russia. He considered any calls for nuclear war to be irresponsible, and in response to Russia's statement said the threat of nuclear weapons is irresponsible. Nuclear war cannot be won, therefore it should never be fought. The meeting of the EU defense ministers, which was joined by NATO's general secretary and Ukraine's defense minister and a bunch of Ukrainian schmucks. He explained that military for the support for the EU and its member states has exceeded 45 billion euros. That's with along with 180 billion dollars. So we're up over 225 billion. And the EU is close to achieving its goal of delivering 1 million artillery rounds to Ukraine. There ain't going to be nobody. Probably the problem they have is there'll be nobody to fire the artillery because they'll all be dead. They discussed European defense preparedness and military readiness, and alongside the implementation, I love this, of the European Defense Industrial Strategy, which aims to strengthen Europeans' dominance in the defense industry. Who do they dominate in the defense industry? So what we got here is this. Can we be honest about it? A raft of bullshit. Hey, nuclear war can't be fought and shouldn't be won. What are you doing? We're attacking a nation that has nuclear weapons. Hey, we've got a European defense industrial strategy. What is it? Jaguar advertisements? That's what they should do. Look, you know what the European defense industrial strategy should be? Just take those Jaguar audience advertisements with the several various non-sexually gender descript people for no apparent reason. We'll take those people and we'll just take that advertisement and take the word Jaguar and put European defense industrial strategy on that advertisement. That's what they ought to do. That's the perfect advertisement for them. They got no industry at a time when their industry is collapsing. When every day we read Europe's industrial capacity is collapsing. When the Russians are like, hey, 2026, go find your own damn gas and stuff like that. We're out. When everything is bleak and black ahead for them, what do they say? We've got to. I love this. We're going to strengthen our dominance in the defense industry. Who do they dominate? Burkina Faso, maybe? Nicaragua? They don't have a defense industry. So I guess theoretically, maybe you dominate countries that don't have a defense industry, but sure as hell ain't Russia, China, or Iran. I can tell you that much. But that's what they do. That's what you do. You make advertisements with a bunch of gender nondescript people that don't have anything to do with Jaguar, that ain't going to sell Jaguars, and you say that's a Jaguar advertisement, and you come up with a European dominance in the defense industry strategy when your defense industry, just like the rest of your industries, are collapsing, and you don't dominate anyone. You use a narrative. And now they're panicking. And they're saying it depends on the outcome of Russia's war. You know, as we say in Zen, if you believe that, it's true, and if you don't, it ain't. Bottom line is that. Does it depend? Look, let's just say the war in Ukraine, the proxy war in Ukraine ended tomorrow, and everybody came to their senses and said, look, let's end this thing. Russia, we're sorry. Let's move on. Let's say they did that. They'd still be screwed. Even if let's say it doesn't and they try to continue it, their industrial capacity is screwed. And when people get ready to vote in Germany in February, it ain't going to be pretty for the ruling elite. We don't know what's going to happen. There are a lot of people saying, yes, the same people are going to continue in power and they're going to continue to do what they do. But we don't know what's going to happen. Trump comes in on the 20th of January. We don't know what Trump's going to do. I mean, there are a lot of people that would like to believe that he's like the second coming of FDR or something. He's putting a lot of morons, maggots, and idiots in his cabinet. So we shall see. I don't know what Trump's going to do. I don't know. Let me just say this. I'm not going to say he's just another neocon. I don't think he is just another neocon. I think he's a different kind of neocon. You want my truth? The truth. Here's what I say about Trump. Trump likes to pick on the little guys. So I think what Trump is going to do is say, we don't want to fight with Russia and China. We don't want to fight with Iran. Now, Nicaragua and Cuba and Venezuela and these little countries will go after them. Or maybe he considers Iran a small country. So he figures we'll go after them. And he wants to use sanctions and things like that to go after them. So Trump's going to try to stop picking a fight with big nuclear powers and pick fight with smaller non-nuclear powers. What he doesn't realize is that because of what's happened over the last 4 years, the little non-nuclear powers are now inextricably linked to the big powers. That now Bolivia, which you overthrew before, which took their country back, now the Russians are going to build a lithium processing plant in Bolivia. And what the hell do you think they're going to do? They're going to be selling that lithium to China and Russia, not you. So the idea, and if the Russians have a lithium processing plant in Bolivia, don't you think they have an interest in protecting their assets? So don't you think their intelligence at the very least will help the Bolivians to fend off any attempted coups that the US may try again in Bolivia? It's a different world. You're not going to be able to pick on the little guys anymore like you did before, because they're going to have the big guys helping them out. Everybody knows your game. And I think Trump's going to try what he did before, and it ain't going to work. But again, you might get couple of good things from Trump. I don't know, but you're going to get some bad. But Trump is part of the system. Also, he's Mr. Neoliberal. You're going to get the austerity monsters are going to come in and say, there's only one way to fix things. Now, think about it. What's been going on? And this is why the US is kind of screwed too. The neoliberal way is to make lots of money by getting bailed out, right? We had the CARES Act under Trump, where $5-6 trillion went to these corporations to bail them out in 2020. So they're going to bail out banks, bail out corporations, trillions and trillions, gigantic tax cuts for the rich. So all this money is going to the rich. And now it's time to settle up. And Trump and Elon Musk, who happen to be the richest man in the world, and their ilk are going to come in and say, look, we've got to be responsible with the way we spend. And everybody's going to say, really, what are you going to do? Well, we're going to lay off lots of government employees, which are the working class, and we're going to cut programs for the poor. So it's the same neoliberal game that Trump's going to come in. The austerity monster Republicans are going to come in, and they're going to look at it and say, through wars and through tax cuts for the rich and all that, we've given a fortune to the rich. And we got to fix that. And the way we're going to fix that is the working class and the poor people are going to take a haircut. We're going to cut programs for the poor and the working class. We're going to lay off people in the working class. We're going to do things to the working class and say, we've got to be responsible. Will you be responsible to take anything away from the rich? Oh, that would be irresponsible. It's all irresponsible to screw the poor. So that's what you're going to get. You're going to get some of the neoliberalism that you'll get with Trump will be neoliberalism on steroids. I saw somebody say end all welfare, right? Corporate welfare, end all welfare for the rich. These gigantic tax cuts for the rich are welfare for the rich. This handing, during the CARES Act, Boeing, they gave Boeing $16.5 billion. It didn't need it. There was nothing, they didn't do anything. Then they said to the airlines, they said, tell you what, we'll bail you out with billions as long as you don't lay anybody else. And the airlines were like, sure, we'll take the billions. They gave them the billions. They immediately started laying people off, and the government did nothing. So yes, end all welfare for the rich and just give money to poor people, homeless people, 20 billion for homeless people. But $5-6 trillion for the rich. What would have happened if we used that money to deal with homelessness or deal with poverty, extreme poverty, something like that? We shouldn't have extreme poverty. We ain't gonna do that. All the money went to the rich, went to the weapons factories, went to the tax cuts for the billionaires. And they told us, oh, yes, that'll really make our economy stronger. How'd that work out? It didn't, because it ain't supposed to work out, because it is a self-serving racket for the rich. And now it's time to pay. And now it's time for somebody to take a haircut to make up for that. And who's it going to be? It's going to be working class, the poor, and the extreme poor, which, of course, is going to cause a backlash. And then we'll see how things go from there. It is what it is. But we continue. I'll continue a little bit more. So what we've got now is a panic in the ruling elite in Europe for this reason. All of those things together. I wanted to make a point. The point I wanted to make is Those who simply say the Ukraine conflict caused this are missing the boat. There are a number of things. There are a number of decisions. There are a number of directions that the ruling elite and the neoliberals, the ruling, you can call them the globalists, you can call them the neoliberals, you can call them the ruling elite, whatever you want to call them. There are a number of decisions, both cultural and economic decisions and industrial decisions that they've made that set the table for the Ukraine conflict. And once the Ukraine conflict that was kind of the final nail in the coffin, but it wasn't the only nail in the coffin. So when you have a discussion about the fall, the industrial fall of the West, it has to include Ukraine, but it can't be narrowly focused on the Ukraine conflict. That's what I'm saying. And now, as Borrell says, the outcome of Russia's war, the EU's future, and he doesn't tell you what that means. Our future depends on Ukraine, the outcome of the Russian war. What do you mean? There's a lot of ways you could take that, but he won't. When he says the EU's future, what he means is the current ruling elite's ability to continue to rule. However, they got a problem. They ain't going to win, and they were never going to win. So now what are their options? There are those looking at the U.S. saying, we don't see a lot of Biden. We've heard nothing of Harris. We don't hear much from Trump. Has there been some kind of a coup? Has the intelligence agencies done some kind of a coup that we don't know about? People are saying, who's making the decisions? Where's Biden? How come Biden's not making? Why isn't he talking to the country? What's going on? Has there been some kind of internal coup? Have they been like, well, you know what? The people don't need to know it, but let's take control of this thing. Has there been some coup thing going on that we don't know about? We'll see. But the panic is very, very apparent in the ruling elite because their issue is this. While the Ukraine conflict is not the sole factor that is wiping out the economy of the West, it is a significant factor, and many, many people believe it to be the sole factor. You and I know better. No, there's a number of factors, but we understand that it is, at this point, I'll put it to you like this. I'm not going to separate it from neoliberalism. I'll say the Ukraine conflict is the crescendo. Neoliberal disaster was building. And when the Ukraine conflict hit, that was the crescendo. That was the ultimate expression of neoliberalism. And then boom, it's all collapsed. It's all downhill from there. So the ruling elite are looking at that saying, what happens when we lose? What happens when Trump comes in and says, we're out? And I suspect that the other thing about Trump, too, is this. The European ruling elite hates him. And I think the feeling's mutual. He don't like them, and he knows they don't like him. I mean, let's face it, the UK tried to screw him. Boy, that was stupid. Tried to help Kamala win. Yeah, great work there, guys. But when Trump comes in, I think whether he'll be able to do it or not, I will tell you, I believe Trump's plan will be this. Yeah, that Ukraine conflict's not ours. You can have it if you want. See ya. I think if I were Trump, I'd go to the Ukrainians and I'd make them an offer that I damn knew they weren't going to take. I'd say to the Ukrainians, look, here's what we're going to do. You're going to give the Russians this, and that, and then you're going to chill out. And the Ukrainians would say, we can't possibly take that deal, President Trump. And I'd say, yeah, that's what I thought. Whoa, I tried, did the best I could. I'll be getting back on the plane here, heading back over to, I just shit going on. You know what I mean? Gas prices are high. Things are happening. Things need to be cut. Things need to be added. So here's what I'm going to do. Hey, I gave it my best shot. Oh, hey, Olaf. Yeah, look, handle it up or something. Give me a call. Let me know how this thing worked out. I tried. These bastards won't listen to anything. But hey, you guys know farther than me. It's your continent. It ain't mine. Do what you need to do. Peace. I'm out. And I would get on my damn plane and I would head straight back to Washington, D.C. and say, handle it. They don't have the money to handle it. They don't have the military resources. They got nothing. They're left with their pants down around their ankles. And I suspect some form of that is what you're going to see from the Trump administration. At least that's what he's going to want to do. But whether he'll do it or not. But at that point, when this thing ultimately comes to and what we've got is one of two ways that this thing concludes. And that is either they make some kind of a deal with the Russians, and it'll be a deal. It will be the effectively an unconditional surrender. They will, or the Russians will continue, and Ukraine will collapse internally, and there'll be internal wars in Ukraine. They'll fight it out. There's going to be some kind of a civil war in Ukraine, and the Russians will clean it up as best they can, and that's that. And then, of course, comes the some variation of a internal civil wars in Europe, where the people say to the ruling elite, "We lost everything, and you lost anyway." Where the people say to the ruling elite, "We're in a situation where we can't even vote our way out of this, because if we vote for the Tories, then we go right back to where we were before, and we are already right back the way we were before, and maybe other parties arise, maybe there's severe disruptions. There ain't no way out for the UK, Germany." And people start to wake up on a park bench and freeze. And so Germany starts to come unglued. Some of these countries are going to come apart. They're going to come unglued when people realize there's nothing to do. And of course, at some point, I will guarantee you this: the time will come when Nord Stream will be the dominant conversation in Germany. The time will come. I'll guarantee. When, I don't know. A lot of people are horrified. They think we're not going to get out of this alive, and we'll all be nuked before January 20th. I don't. But who knows? Who knows? Look, is Trump going to survive? Are they going to take him out? Are they going to take? Have we already had a soft coup? Is a coup coming? Who knows? Things are unstable, but I think we make it, and we'll go from there. While I'm at it, before I break, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look for super chats because it appears there may be some, and I don't always get a chance. And if you got something that you want to be addressed, just, oh, here's one. Do a super chat. Why hasn't Trump said anything about ATACMS? Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I had the answer. I mean, is he being threatened? Is he being held in a bunker somewhere? Is there some coup? That's a question that needs to be asked. Are we not seeing the people who are supposed to be in power? Has there been a soft coup? Has the intelligence agencies taken over? Has Blinken, Sullivan? I mean, these people are panicked. They could get a rope around their stinking necks. So who knows? That's a question. That's a good question. And it gives rise to the suspicions that there's been some kind of a soft coup in the highest levels of the U.S. government. Okay, Sparkster says, how about that new Russian missile? Unlike all NATO weapons, it seems to be a true game changer, sort of going nuclear without going nuclear, precision devastation with no fallout or radiation. Yes, what they've done is they've created a dominant weapon that doesn't require, you know what it is? It's a non-nuclear, here's the term I would use, a non-nuclear strategic weapon. That's what it is. It is a non-nuclear strategic weapon. So, it's a beast. It is a game changer, because if you're NATO, you always got to say to yourself, man, we got X amount of bases. Each one of those has 6 warheads, and each warhead has 6 other warheads, and they're all hypersonic. So each missile one missile on every NATO base means 36 hypersonic missiles. And what happens if they could use the kinetic energy of the missiles? They could use they could put explosive charges on the missiles. Technically, they could put nuclear missiles, but I think the real plan for that missile is that it's not nuclear. Is that it is a strategic missile, a weapon of domination that doesn't require a nuclear attack. So now they could launch an attack against somebody, a powerful strategic attack that's non-nuclear. Game changer. It gives you something between traditional weapons and nuclear weapons. It allows you to have, 1 foot in base on first, and to run the second and still keep 1 foot on base, right? To go strategic without going nuclear. It is really a brilliant concept. Let us continue. The old Hazel missile. All right, next. Red Chili Pepper, super sticker. Thank you, Red. Thanks, RCP. How about we go to Far, thank you, Far, for the super sticker. Far away, so far away. All right, so next, what we're going to do is we're going to see if there's any Rumble rants. Are there any Rumble rants? We're going to go to Rumble. You will pardon me for looking elsewhere. All right, do we got any Rumble rants? Nope, no Rumble rants. And last but not least, we're going to go to good old Rockfin because somebody there might just have something to say. All righty. Okay. David Boteller. Thank you very much, David Boteller, for it. So there we go. I think that's it for everybody. All right. Well, thanks a lot, gang. I can ask you, number one, share this on all your social media platforms. Last but not least, let me make sure no more super chats. Nope. Last but not least, please, if you can afford to, well, first of all, this is important. Like, share, subscribe. Share this on all your social media platforms. We got 1,444 people. So please, can we get 1,444 posts on X and other platforms, right? Smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And of course, we got Buy Me a Coffee, which is great. You just click, hey, buy Garland a coffee. How much? $5. How many coffees? X amount. There you go. And of course, with Buy Me a Coffee, it can be just like Patreon, where if you want to do monthly, you can, but you don't have to. So Buy Me a Coffee. We got Patreon, PayPal, Cash App, lots of ways to contribute to the channel. Certainly appreciate it. This is all I do now. I'm no longer on do my radio show on Sputnik. That is gone. TU, as they say. That's done. So this is what I do. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy conversing with everybody. And I thank everybody for supporting the channel. Share it on all your social media platforms. Peace. I'm out.